It's April 1st, 2024. I'm in the United States of America with an O-N-E and an In God We Trust, Jackson, and then the White House, Franklin, and Independence Hall. I was watching this afternoon, Channel 7 has on this recap of Easter with the White House, with President Joe Biden and Dr. Jill. Channel 7 has a different angle than Channel 2. Not sure what that's about. They also aired this on one of the on FX. They aired Spider-Man Far Away From Home and then Spider-Man No Way Home, which raised a lot of concerns for me. The one Far Away From Home featured London and Italy in that theoretical construct of this is like the third series of Spider-Man. There were two other actors. There was different cast. In this third one, there was some crossover. I know that's important in different security apparatuses. I just don't know whatever in the whatever. So I'm just sitting silent on that. Channel 2 also this evening put on a piece about the U.S. Postal Service, the federal system, and the mail in Queens. They've been doing it since last summer. They picked it back up again. They did a more detailed piece. And there are other residents other than myself that are concerned. I don't even know what I'm not receiving. And with this increase in, I don't see a lot of mail trucks anymore, the U.S. Postal Service mail trucks. I see a lot of Amazon Prime trucks. Not so much FedEx, but they're here too. And then the UPS Brown, the ground service with the brown trucks. There's a lot of those. It's mostly that and Amazon Prime for some reason. I don't know what happened to the U.S. Postal Service trucks. So that's worth mention. And then there's a piece from Homeland Security on Havana Syndrome and these gaps in intelligence. So I'm just careful how I preface this, but this is what it looks like. This is the piece that's from ABC Channel 7, where they have the White House lawn. And then when I go to Channel 2, the CBS in New York, it's different.
The White House hosted its annual Easter egg roll on the South Lawn this morning. President Biden, First Lady Jill Biden, and two Easter bunnies welcoming families. Children used wooden spoons to raise colorful eggs across the grass. There was also an egg hunt, because you have to have one of those. And music from marching bands. This year's theme was coined Egg-ucation as part of the First Lady's push for learning initiatives. There was also a schoolhouse activity area and a reading nook. The Easter egg roll, that dates back to 1878.
Well, still to come on Eyewitness News First and 4.
Okay, so episode 66 on CBS this morning's in New York. This is what this piece looked like, which it almost looks like a different angle than Channel 7 decided to use.
We welcome you back to CBS Mornings. I'm Gail King. That's Tony DeCopel. That's Vladimir Duthiers. Nate's off today. Coming up in this 8 o'clock hour, we've got a classic David Begnaud story to start your week off right. David found a woman there who's devoted herself to others.
It goes from this country star over to the story about the White House.
She's never done on television before.
That is such a tease.
That's such a tease for us.
What is it?
Yeah, we're like, what is she going to do?
Now I want to know, what is that going to do? I just saw her in the green room.
Let's stick around and find out.
Yeah, I think we'll stay. We really do look forward to that. But first, we're going to begin this hour with this. One of the great annual traditions in Washington. You know, we're talking about that Easter egg roll on the White House South Lawn. Around 40,000 people are expected this year, but guess what? Thunderstorms have held up the celebration so far. Believe it or not, this tradition goes all the way back to 1878. None of us were around then. Weijia Zhang's at the White House now. Nice and early, so Weijia, you got a good space. Did you bring any little children with you?
Not right now, Gail, because Mama has to work, but they'll be coming along later to participate in the egg roll, which, of course, is the main event here. And hopefully that bad weather will move out soon so children can line up in lines using wooden spoons to roll colorful eggs and race down the South Lawn. Now, if you're thinking that's very messy, these are the eggs, Gail. They are wooden, so no worries about making a big scramble all over the South Lawn. As an educator, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden has chosen the theme egg-education, turning her backyard into a school-inspired community with stations set up for story time, games, and live entertainment. And of course, you mentioned that this tradition started back in 1878. Well, here's a fun fact about why. Back then in the 1870s, Capitol Hill was actually the hot spot for kids to roll eggs and themselves down the hill on Easter Monday. But as that event grew, so did damage to the ground. So Congress passed a law in 1876 forbidding the activity. 2 years later, President Rutherford B. Hayes issued an order that children would be allowed to come over here and roll eggs instead. So here we are 145 years later. Yeah.
Still going strong. It's a ticket everybody wants to do. So, Weijia, who gets to come play at the White House today?
So there was an online public lottery for general admission tickets, and those guests are coming from across the country. But the participants also include thousands of military and veteran families, caregivers, and survivors invited by the White House. President Biden and Vice President Harris will come out to address the crowd later this morning. They will also blow the whistle to start off a couple of rounds of races. So those super lucky kids in the right time, the right place, will get to roll in front of Biden and Harris. No pressure.
It is always a very fun event. Weijia, thank you so much. May I say you have excellent taste in clothing. I bought that exact same top 2 weeks ago.
What?
Wow.
Wow. It's a Kate Spade. I know it well.
It's perfect
Thank you,
for
Weijia.
today.
It really is. Thank you very much.
Very Eastery. All right, very cool. All right, I had a very special David Begnaud.
Now, they have this piece on about Havana Syndrome. I'm really careful with this because of some of the instances I've gone through while I've been in New York. One of them was an instance where I wasn't sure if it was a stroke and I could hardly get words out of my mouth. And then strange stuff, like I asked for a national security rep. They sent me somebody from Beijing, China, who was visiting as a student inside of New York. Same General George Washington, first President George Washington, with an O-N-E and an In God We Trust, with a 26-letter English alphabet. So that got confusing, although I guess technically we're in Middle Colony. If we're talking like New England, Middle Colony, Southern Colony, I guess technically I'm Middle Colony, but again, I only learned English, and English, French, and German are 26-letter alphabets. That's incredibly crucial. And then they did not, when I entered the hospital in Stony Brook, after I called one contact I had in New York, but I couldn't really speak on the phone to him. I knew something was going on and I didn't know what it was. And then some weirdness went on, not only with Tia Frio 1975, and my dad, and some other things going on, trying to mislabel me. So now when I hear this Havana Syndrome, after 60 Minutes did a piece on it, I keep an ear out for how exactly are they using this piece of information.
7:30 CBS Mornings and our colleagues Scott Pelley and 60 Minutes are reporting important new details from a long-running investigation into so-called...
But also what was weird is when I went into Stony Brook, I mean, we have a woman presenting inside the emergency room, having trouble speaking, and they, for some reason, don't even do a MRI or a CAT scan. They don't send me into anything along those lines. What they did was they took some blood, which I wasn't on anything, and then an endocrinologist showed up, and then that was it. They left me in a bed and then assigned me, when I got to a room, they assigned me this nursing student from Beijing, China. So again, everything that happened in that hospital was not up to New York board certified standards. My treatment was completely bastardized by children from elsewhere that are inside of our medical system on Long Island. So to get a clean opinion was very difficult. And they said a lot of really disparaging and defamation words that might try to hurt my character in upcoming things that I might have to do for myself in self-defense and around my children, should anything ever happen. But they didn't even follow standard board certified, medical procedures, these children from elsewhere, not just China, but the other ones that were there. I don't know where they immigrated from and were studying from, but they certainly were not family representatives, which is what I was looking for when I asked for national security.
Called Havana Syndrome. This is those high-tech attacks, physical attacks, really, on officials working overseas. And last night's report looked at several incidents. These incidents have led some people to believe that Russia may be responsible for the attacks that have left Americans with a variety of debilitating symptoms. And a recently retired Pentagon official who led an investigation into Havana Syndrome told 60 Minutes about the patterns that he saw in the officials who were targeted.
One of the things I started to notice was the caliber of our officer that was being impacted. This wasn't happening to our worst or our middle range officers. This was happening to our top 5-10% performing officers across the Defense Intelligence Agency. And consistently, there was a Russia nexus. There was some angle where they had worked against Russia, focused on Russia, and done extremely well.
What has been the impact on American national security?
The impact has been that the intelligence officers and our diplomats working abroad are being removed from their posts with traumatic brain injuries. They're being neutralized.
Now, in a statement to 60 Minutes, the director of national intelligence said, quote, "It is very unlikely a foreign adversary is responsible," adding agencies have various confidence levels because we still have gaps in collecting intelligence. CBS News contributor Samantha Vinograd is a former assistant secretary of Homeland Security for counterterrorism and threat prevention, and she's familiar with the government's investigation into so-called Havana Syndrome. Sam, thank you very much for joining us. So that investigator, now retired Lieutenant Colonel, he believes that the bar for proving this syndrome is real has been set too high because America doesn't want to confront some hard truths. He's also saying that the impact has been significant and the targeting quite specific. What do you...
Now, by hard truths, there's a 5-letter word pattern that is used on the box that sells the Galaxy phone and which is the Android phone, I think, by Samsung, and also by the Apple phone. There's this 5-letter word that they use. Is it like, I don't know, a brand of some sort in like an NIL kind of a way that made its way into the market where we targeted? Was it a direct target with technology and some other stuff going on? But it does exist, but because of where land is, where monetary is, that this is being sold and branded within, and then all of a sudden, like, mass migration and movement of people that never were here and citizens before inside the US. So, like, there's this weird paradigm shift, kind of coincides with the timing of this let out of this technology, which was branded with some very specific 5-letter pattern. When I look on a globe, I can find it there. But again, it was not something that, going back generations, I mean, they had very specific laws against such things going on. So I'm not quite sure where the North American security apparatus and like what happened there over my grandparents, into my parents, and into my lifetime. I'm not quite sure where this whatever that took place.
What do you make of the allegations?
Well, I agree that there are significant national security implications of Havana Syndrome. We have individuals from key national security agencies doing critical work in intelligence, law enforcement, diplomacy, and the military, and more, being taken off the field. That puts us at a disadvantage. At the same time, Tony, it is a public perception that the U.S. government, despite its best efforts, is simply unable to protect public servants deployed overseas, as well as some public servants here in the homeland. And that really projects a symbol of both vulnerability and weakness. And that's why it's critically important that the Biden administration continue to investigate the causes of these incidents, while concurrently offering medical services and other forms of compensation and protection to the individuals that have been impacted.
Yeah, it's certainly a bad look. It's called Havana Syndrome because it first popped up reportedly in Havana with our agents there, officials there. But Russia is apparently who the lead suspect is, according to the 60 Minutes report. And there's amazing footage of an alleged Russian spy who was then taken out or died on the front lines there. This is a chase to catch that spy. What do you make about the Russia nexus, as another 60 Minutes interview put it? Is Russia behind this? What's the likelihood?
Well, it is a no-brainer that the intelligence community would investigate whether perhaps our strongest adversary is a culprit behind these attacks. The intelligence community issued a report in March of last year that was frankly unsatisfactory. It stated that it was very unlikely that a foreign adversary is behind these attacks, but noted that it has major intelligence gaps and that there isn't high confidence in their assessment. These attacks do have hallmarks of Russian tradecraft. They're using advanced, non-traditional weaponry, and the Russians have done that kind of work in the past. So it could certainly be Russia, but the evidentiary basis that the intelligence community has right now isn't strong enough. And while they continue their investigation, Tony, it just remains critically important that the government do everything possible to protect Americans from these attacks.
Sam, there was a critical moment in the story. A lawyer representing an FBI agent affected by Havana Syndrome told Scott Pelley he believes that there is evidence of a cover-up by the U.S. government. You're a former Homeland Security official. What's your analysis of those comments?
Vlad, I was exposed to the administration's work on these anomalous health incidents, and insinuating that there's a cover-up underway is just flat out wrong. The intelligence community has set up a special cell, a global health incident cell, to investigate these incidents. Departments and agencies, including my former agency, the Department of Homeland Security, has sent very widespread communications encouraging individuals to report these incidents so they can be investigated and so that people can get help. That's the opposite of a cover-up. It is...
Now, from where I am in Queens, I don't have access. If Department of Homeland Security is putting it out, I don't know where or how they're disseminating it. I'm not receiving any kind of U.S. postal mail. And there's no, like, newsletter that's coming out. There's no publication that I have access to. I mean, and, like, these were not discussed in school growing up. Before I got the diploma in Astoria from St. John's Prep, before I went on to adulthood. And they were not discussed in the level of university and college that I had access to.
It's unsatisfactory that we don't know with a strong evidentiary basis who's responsible for those attacks, but that's very different than a cover-up.
Samantha Vinograd, always great to have your analysis. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Up next, could the solar eclipse boost the economy? Ahead, we're going to...
Now, this is a piece about the U.S. Postal Service, the mail service, M-A-I-L, in Queens, which is where I am. It's the... Again, I saw a sign on the side of the road that was green and white that said Borough, B-O-R-O, but it's always been County Queens, or Queens County, for as long as I've known.
People missing prescriptions, passports, and sensitive information, all because of mail theft. It is a problem that we have been reporting on for months now in Queens. CBS 2's Elle McLogan has been digging into this issue and the response now from the Postal Service.
Neighbors have reached a breaking point on 21st Street in Astoria.
What is going on here? We feel abandoned, we feel unheard, and we feel violated, quite frankly.
The problem? A pair of green USPS relay boxes, postal storage used to lighten the load for mail carriers. Season after season, break-ins here are caught on camera, mailbags seen hoisted into getaway cars.
Well, I'm missing my passport. I have neighbors up here. He didn't get his insulin.
And they're not alone. Locals from Bayside to Woodside tell us paychecks and driver's licenses have been snatched in transit.
This is Elle McLogan with CBS 2 News calling with an interview request.
The Postal Service declined our attempts to speak for this story, instead telling us by email that it's making strides against theft.
It's a disaster.
Frank Albergo is union president for the Postal Police, a division he calls underutilized. He points to a little piece of metal at the heart of the issue, the arrow key.
Criminals want those arrow keys. So the arrow keys give access to all the mail receptacles in a given zip code.
This universal key is motivating bribery and robbery, police say. A mail carrier assault was reported recently in Woodhaven.
The postal workers who are doing their best are being beaten up for this.
The Postal Service has touted its Project Safe Delivery, rolling out upgrades to some arrow locks, though declining to say which ones.
So there's a lock right here?
The bullet lock is basically an additional locking mechanism that should protect the mail even further.
This here is the lock where the arrow key goes in, but here on top is what could be a second layer of protection. This is a space for what's called a bullet lock, and we found that on green relay boxes across Queens, this space sits empty.
Nothing has been done. The locks haven't been changed. A second lock hasn't been added. There's no official notifications being sent to us at all.
Mail theft victims are growing increasingly desperate as they anticipate the next break-in.
Something has to be done. This is not safe for anybody.
And Elle joins us now here in studio to talk a little bit more about this. Elle, you know, you've been covering this mail theft situation in Queens since last summer, and yet it's not improving. What's going on?
It does not seem to be going away. We continue to hear from viewers who are experiencing this problem saying their mail is going missing. And we are hearing from neighbors in Astoria who say that they've taken it upon themselves to start their own newsletter to keep each other updated. They feel that's their best bet at this point, is to rely on their own community for updates.
That's got to be so frustrating for them. And now we're hearing that the Postal Service is under federal scrutiny. Tell us more about that.
That's right. There have been a number of audits that have uncovered failures and shortcomings within the Postal Service and their handling of postal mail theft. And now Queens has been flagged as another area of focus for yet another audit by the Office of the Inspector General, which tells us that report could, come out with any kinds of results. And now our viewers are eager to hear those findings and hope that it could spark some meaningful change.
All right. Well, we know that you'll be on this until the end. Elle, thank you. Appreciate you joining us here in studio. By the way, Queens isn't the only place experiencing this problem. CBS consumer correspondent Usher Qureshi is looking into data that shows mail theft complaints are on the rise nationwide. You can see his full report tomorrow on CBS 2 News at 5 o'clock. Yeah,
I know this sounds crazy, but even that word nation, I mean, if there are pieces and parts of the system, and now they have something in New York, that they refer to as United Nations. So which nation is looking into it? And then how is that weighted thereafter? I mean, it feels like it feels like a question I don't really want to be asking. It seems kind of redundant. It doesn't even seem like it should be possibly like chain of command being so important in someone's business in the North American security apparatus. But I already know in Queens, and I've documented it, that if chain of command is so crucially important, there is a break in the local, they call it, and again, this gets really like tricky with the way that they specify it, it's not necessarily township. I don't know what the township would be called at Town and Country. That's a Chrysler reference, which now they have as Pacifica, as a minivan. Like, again, in automakers, like some of these things sometimes with the tricks that they do, with GMs and IGs and AGs. So I, again, don't really know, like, how do I get to a class sensitive? Like, I'm RH sensitive. So, I mean, and that's by ABO genetics. So it's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.